In the small town of Willow Creek, life moved at a gentle pace. The streets were lined with old oak trees, and the air always carried the faint scent of wild flowers. It was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other by name. Kids rode their bikes down quiet lanes, and everyone looked out for one another. In this close-knit community, there lived a family that everyone admired, a father and his twin children who were the heart and soul of the town. The father, a man in his late 40s, was known to everyone as someone who could light up any room with his warm smile. He worked hard to provide for his family, often putting in long hours at the local factory. Despite his busy schedule, he always made time for his kids. His twins, a boy and a girl, had just turned 18. They were inseparable, sharing not only their looks but also their dreams. Both were adventurous souls, eager to leave the confines of Willow Creek and explore the world beyond the hills. The bond between the three was something people talked about often. Whether it was working on projects together, taking weekend hikes, or simply sitting around the dinner table laughing, they seemed to have a connection that many envied. Their laughter was infectious, and their kindness touched everyone they met. But little did anyone know, fate had something unimaginable in store for them. It was an unseasonably cold spring morning when everything changed. The sky was overcast, and a biting chill lingered in the air. The father had left for work earlier than usual, promising his kids he'd be back by evening. He planned to take them to their favorite park later that day. It was a tradition they'd kept alive since. The twins were little, but as he drove home from work, disaster struck without warning. A sharp pain shot through his chest, and before he could react, his car swerved off the road and crashed into a tree. By the time help arrived, it was too late. Back at home, twins had no idea what had happened. They waited patiently, chatting about their plans for the future. When their father didn't return by late afternoon, they decided to walk along the same route to meet him halfway. The path led through winding roads surrounded by dense woods, a route they'd taken countless times before. But this time, things were different. The icy pavement made driving treacherous, and another vehicle lost control, skidding directly toward them. The impact was devastating, and neither of the twins survived. By nightfall, news of the tragedy spread like wildfire through Willow Creek. Neighbors gathered outside the family's home, struggling to comprehend how such a vibrant household could be wiped out in a single day. Everyone was in shock. How could this happen? 3 lives gone within hours of each other. It felt surreal, almost impossible to believe. Parents hugged their children tighter that night, and friends consoled one another, trying to make sense of the senseless. As the days passed, grief settled heavily over the town. People couldn't stop talking about the strange coincidence of all 3 deaths happening on the same day. Some whispered about destiny, while others muttered about cruel twists of fate. No one could shake the feeling that something about this tragedy was hauntingly unusual. And though no one realized it yet, the worst was still to come. The preparations for the funeral began soon after. The decision was made to hold a joint service to honor the deep bond between the father and his twins. Friends and neighbors pitched in, decorating the church with flowers and arranging photographs that captured happy moments from the family's life. The entire town came together, determined to give them a farewell worthy of their memory. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. The mother of the twins, who had been absent from their lives for years, returned to town unexpectedly. Her arrival stirred mixed emotions among the townsfolk. Some pitied her, imagining the guilt she must feel for not being there when her family needed her most. Others resented her presence, blaming her absence for adding to the family's struggles. Whatever the case, her return cast a shadow over an already painful situation. As the day of the funeral approached, the atmosphere in Willow Creek grew heavier. Rain clouds loomed over the town, mirroring the somber mood of its residents. Hundreds of people prepared to attend the service, each carrying memories of the father and his twins. What none of them anticipated, however, was the horrifying detail that would emerge during the ceremony, a moment so shocking it would leave everyone reeling and forever alter the way they remembered the family. This was more than just a story of loss. It was a tale of love, regret, and the haunting reminders of how fragile life truly is. And as the events unfolded, the people of Willow Creek would find themselves grappling not only with their grief but also with questions they might never be able to answer. The days following the tragedy felt like a blur for the people of Willow Creek. Grief hung thick in the air, wrapping itself around every corner of the town. It was as if time had slowed down, each moment stretching longer than it should. Neighbors, who usually exchanged cheerful greetings, now walked past one another with hollow eyes, unable to find words that could ease the weight of what had happened. The loss of the father and his twins wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a wound that cut deep into the heart of the entire community. Everyone had their own memories of the family, and those memories became both a comfort and a source of pain. At the local cafe, where the father often stopped for coffee before work, the barista found herself staring at the empty stool he used to sit on. She remembered how he'd always order 2 extra pastries, one for each of his kids, and joke about how they were growing too fast to keep up with feeding them. Now the sight of the pastry display made her throat tighten. At school, teachers spoke softly about the twins during staff meetings. They recalled how the boy's curiosity seemed endless. He was always asking questions, eager to understand how things worked. His sister, on the other hand, had a quiet confidence that drew people to her. She was the kind of person you wanted beside you when things got tough, because she had this way of making everything seem okay. Together, they were unstoppable, a perfect balance of energy and calm. Their absence left a void in classrooms and hallways that no one knew how to fill. As preparations for the funeral continued, the church became a hive of activity. Volunteers came together to decorate the space, hanging garlands of white flowers and arranging photographs that told the story of the family's life. There was a picture of the father holding the twins as babies, his face glowing with pride. Another showed the 3 of them standing by a lake, laughing as the wind tousled their hair. Each image was a reminder of happier times, but they also served as a stark contrast to the present, a cruel reminder of all that had been lost. Despite the unity among the townsfolk, there was an undercurrent of unease. People couldn't stop talking about the bizarre coincidence of all 3 deaths happening on the same day. Some whispered about fate, wondering if there was some greater force at play. Others dismissed it as mere chance, though even they couldn't shake the feeling that something about the timing was unsettling. Conversations would start casually enough, someone mentioning how cold the weather had been, but inevitably, they'd circle back to the accident. 3 lives gone within hours, someone might say, shaking their head. How does something like that even happen? Adding to the tension was the unexpected return of the mother. After years of living far away from Willow Creek, she suddenly reappeared, stepping off a bus with a suitcase in one hand and a look of guilt etched onto her face. Her arrival sent ripples through the town. For some, her presence was a painful reminder of the fractured family dynamics that had existed long before the tragedy. Rumors swirled about why she'd left in the first place and whether she bore any responsibility for what had happened. Did she argue with the father? Was there bitterness between them? No one knew for sure, but speculation ran rampant. For others, pity outweighed judgment. They imagined the guilt she must be carrying, knowing she hadn't been there when her family needed her most. One elderly woman, who had known the mother since childhood, approached her after spotting her sitting alone on a bench near the park. "You're here now," the woman said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "That counts for something." The mother nodded but didn't speak. Her silence only fueled more questions. Still, her return forced everyone to confront uncomfortable truths. Families began having difficult conversations around dinner tables. Parents hugged their children a little tighter, reminding themselves not to take their loved ones for granted. Friends reached out to mend broken relationships, realizing how fleeting life could be. In a strange way, the tragedy brought people closer together, even as it tore apart the lives of those directly affected. But despite these moments of reflection, the heaviness lingered. As the funeral day drew nearer, the mood grew darker. Rain clouds gathered overhead, mirroring the somber tone of the town. Everyone knew the service would be emotional, but no one anticipated the horrifying detail that awaited them. Little did they know, the funeral would reveal something so shocking it would leave an indelible mark on the collective memory of Willow Creek in the days leading up to the ceremony. The mother spent most of her time alone, visiting places she hadn't seen in years. She walked along the same path her children had taken on the day of the accident, stopping at the spot where the crash occurred. Standing there, she stared at the twisted metal and shattered glass still scattered along the roadside. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to piece together what had happened. Why had they decided to walk that route? Had they been worried about their father? The question swirled in her mind, unanswered and agonizing. Back at the house, volunteers helped clean and organize belongings, preparing for the influx of visitors expected at the wake. Boxes of old photographs, letters, and mementos were unearthed, each item stirring fresh waves of emotion. Among the items was a handwritten note from the boy, scribbled hastily on a scrap of paper. Asterisk, "We'll make it big someday, Dad. Just wait and see." Reading those words brought tears to even the strongest hearts. It was a glimpse into the dreams that had been cut short, the futures that would never unfold. By the evening before the funeral, exhaustion had set in. People moved slowly, weighed down by sorrow and fatigue. Yet, amid the grief, there was also a sense of determination. The town was determined to honor the family properly, to celebrate their lives rather than dwell solely on their deaths. Candles were lit in windows across Willow Creek, casting a soft glow against the encroaching darkness. It was a small gesture, but it symbolized hope, a fragile yet persistent belief that light could still exist, even in the darkest of times. As the final preparations were made, whispers of dread began to circulate. Something about the upcoming funeral felt ominous, though no one could put their finger on why. Perhaps it was the eerie coincidence of the deaths, or maybe it was the lingering questions surrounding the accident. Whatever the reason, a sense of foreboding settled over the town, casting a shadow that no amount of candlelight could dispel. Unbeknownst to anyone, the next day would bring a revelation so horrifying it would change the way they viewed the tragedy and themselves forever. The morning of the funeral dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself was mourning alongside the people of Willow Creek. A light drizzle began, just as the first cars pulled into the church parking lot, misting the windshields and dampening the hems of dresses and suits. Despite the rain, the turnout was overwhelming. Hundreds of people filed into St. Mary's Church, filling every pew and spilling into the aisles. Friends, neighbors, teachers, classmates, everyone who had ever crossed paths with the family came to pay their respects. The air was thick with emotion, a mix of sorrow, disbelief, and quiet determination to honor the lives that had been lost. Inside the church, 3 caskets stood side by side at the front, a stark reminder of the magnitude of the tragedy. The father's casket was made of polished mahogany, its deep brown hue reflecting the warmth and strength he had always embodied. Beside it were 2 matching ivory caskets for the twins, adorned with delicate floral arrangements in shades of white and pale blue. Photographs rested atop each casket, one of the father smiling broadly, his arm around the shoulders of the twins, another of the boy mid-laugh, his eyes crinkled with joy, and a third of the girl gazing thoughtfully into the distance, her expression calm and kind. As the organ began to play, the congregation fell silent. The pastor stepped forward, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. He spoke of the father's generosity, his unwavering dedication to his children, and the way he had touched so many lives in the community. He wasn't just a man, the pastor said softly. He was a pillar of this town, someone we all leaned on without even realizing it. His words brought tears to many eyes, and sniffles echoed through the sanctuary. When the pastor turned to speak about the twins, the atmosphere shifted. There was a collective ache in the room as he described their boundless energy, their dreams of adventure, and the bond they shared. They were inseparable, he said, pausing to gather himself, and not just because they were twins. They had a connection that went deeper than blood. Where one went, the other followed, and together they lit up the world around them. The eulogy painted a vivid picture of who they were and what they meant to those who loved them. But even as the pastor urged everyone to focus on celebrating their lives rather than dwelling on their deaths, an uneasy tension lingered in the air. It wasn't just grief, it was something more primal, a sense of foreboding that no one could quite explain. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, glancing toward the caskets as if expecting something. When the service concluded, the pallbearers moved solemnly to carry the caskets out of the church. The crowd rose to their feet, heads bowed in respect. For a moment, everything seemed normal. The slow shuffle of footsteps, the soft rustle of clothing, the occasional muffled sob. And then it happened. One of the pallbearers carrying the boy's casket stumbled slightly on the uneven carpet near the altar. The casket tilted precariously, and though he quickly steadied it, the lid shifted open just enough to reveal part of the boy's face. What everyone saw next froze them in place. Gasps rippled through the church like waves, followed by a stunned silence so complete you could hear the faint patter of rain against the stained glass windows. The boy's face bore an expression of sheer terror. His mouth was frozen in a silent scream, his wide-open eyes staring blankly ahead as if etched with the memory of unspeakable fear. It was a look that haunted everyone who saw it, searing itself into their minds like a photograph they couldn't unsee. Someone let out a strangled cry, breaking the silence, and others quickly averted their gaze, unable to bear the sight any longer. The pallbearers hurriedly closed the casket again, but the damage was done. Panic spread through the congregation. Like wildfire, whispers erupted, growing louder and more frantic. "What does this mean?" one person muttered. "How is that possible?" Another asked, their voice trembling. No one had answers, only questions that piled on top of the grief already crushing them. The mother, sitting in the front row, covered her face with her hands, shaking uncontrollably. Her shoulders heaved with sobs, and she had to be helped out of the church by friends who barely knew how to comfort her. Even the strongest among the mourners felt their resolve crack under the weight of what they'd just witnessed. How could anyone reconcile such a horrifying image with the vibrant, joyful boy they remembered? Outside the church, the rain picked up, soaking the ground and turning the grass muddy. People gathered under umbrellas or huddled together for shelter, too stunned to move. Conversations buzzed around the disturbing detail, each retelling adding new layers of dread. Some speculated about foul play, while others wondered if there was some medical explanation for the boy's terrified expression. Could he have been conscious when help arrived? Had he known he was dying? The possibilities churned in everyone's minds, none of them offering any real comfort. Amid the chaos, a few individuals tried to maintain order. One elderly woman, a longtime friend of the family, stood on the steps of the church, raising her voice above the murmurs. "We can't let fear overshadow their memory," she pleaded. "This family deserves better than us standing here speculating. Let's honor them the way they would want, with love and gratitude." Her words struck a chord, and slowly the crowd began to settle. The procession resumed, with the caskets being loaded into hearses and driven to the cemetery. Along the route, townspeople lined the streets, holding candles despite the rain. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about the community's desire to hold on to hope. Even in the face of despair. At the gravesite, the ceremony continued, though the mood remained somber. As the caskets were lowered into the ground, many attendees found themselves glancing nervously at the one belonging to the boy. That single horrifying glimpse of his face refused to leave their thoughts. It loomed over the proceedings like a shadow, casting doubt and unease over what should have been a final farewell. By the time the service ended, exhaustion had settled over everyone. People exchanged quiet goodbyes, promising to check in on one another in the coming days. But as they drove home, the questions lingered, gnawing at the edges of their minds. What had really happened to the boy? Why did his face carry such a look of terror? And perhaps most hauntingly, what did it mean for the rest of them? For the people of Willow Creek, the funeral wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the beginning of something far darker. The horrifying detail uncovered during the service left them grappling with emotions they hadn't anticipated: fear, guilt, and an overwhelming need for answers. Little did they know the truth behind the boy's final moments would soon come to light, forcing them to confront realities they weren't prepared to face. The days following the funeral were unlike anything Willow Creek had ever experienced. The horrifying detail revealed during the service, the boy's terrified expression, had left an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed it. Conversations around town were hushed, filled with speculation and dread. People couldn't stop talking about what they'd seen, replaying the image in their minds over and over again. It was as if the boy's frozen scream had become a ghost that haunted not just the cemetery but the entire community. News of the shocking discovery spread quickly beyond Willow Creek. Local reporters descended on the small town, eager to uncover more details about the tragedy. At first, residents tried to shield themselves from the media frenzy, closing doors and pulling curtains shut. But curiosity eventually got the better of some, and interviews began. Neighbors recounted stories of the family, their voices trembling as they described the father's kindness and the twins' infectious laughter. Each retelling only deepened the sense of loss and the unease surrounding the boy's final moments. And Fafi. Investigation was launched almost immediately. Authorities reopened the case, determined to find answers for the grieving family and the shaken community. Autopsies were conducted once again, this time with a special focus on the boy. What they discovered sent shockwaves through Willow Creek and far beyond. It turned out that while the father and the girl had died instantly upon impact, the boy hadn't. His injuries were severe broken bones, internal bleeding, but he had survived for several agonizing minutes trapped inside the wreckage. Witnesses at the scene later recalled hearing faint cries before emergency services arrived. Those cries, which had gone largely unnoticed amid the chaos of the crash, took on a new meaning in light of the autopsy findings. The boy had been conscious long enough to realize he was hurt badly, perhaps even aware that help might not arrive in time. For the people of Willow Creek, this revelation was unbearable. They imagined the boy lying there, pinned beneath twisted metal, his body broken and his mind racing with fear. Had he called out for his sister or his father? Did he know they were already gone? The thought of him enduring those final moments alone, surrounded by darkness and pain, was too much to bear. Parents hugged their children tighter that night, whispering prayers of gratitude that such a fate hadn't befallen their own families. The mother, who had returned to town after years away, bore the weight of this truth heavier than anyone else. She spent hours sitting in her car outside the crash site, staring blankly at the road where her children had taken their last steps. Friends tried to convince her to come inside, to rest, to eat something, but she refused. Her guilt consumed her, eating away at whatever strength she had left. She replayed every argument she'd ever had with the father, every decision she'd made that led her to leave Willow Creek and her family behind. Now faced with the horrifying reality of her son's final moments, she felt like she was drowning in regret. As word of the investigation's findings spread, the town became a powder keg of emotion. Some people lashed out, angry that no one had realized the boy was still alive when they arrived at the scene. Why didn't anyone check? One man shouted during a heated discussion at the local diner. Others defended the first responders, pointing out how chaotic the situation must have been. They did everything they could, a woman argued, tears streaming down her face. You can't blame them for something like this. Amid the arguments and accusations, a deeper question lingered. Why had fate dealt such a cruel hand to this family? The coincidence of all three deaths happening on the same day was already unsettling, but now, knowing that the boy had suffered alone in his final moments, it felt downright sinister. People began questioning things they'd never questioned before. Was there some greater force at play? Or was life truly as random and merciless as this tragedy suggested? The media coverage intensified, turning Willow Creek into a national headline. Reporters camped out near the crash site, interviewing anyone willing to speak. Some locals resented the intrusion, feeling like their grief was being exploited for clicks and ratings. Others saw it as an opportunity to share the story of the other family they loved so deeply, hoping it might bring some semblance of closure. One neighbor, an older man who had known the father since childhood, sat down with a journalist and spoke candidly about the family's bond. They weren't just a father and kids, he said, his voice thick with emotion. They were a team. Everything they did together. Losing all three of them, it's like losing part of the town itself. Despite the attention, the town struggled to move forward. Businesses operated on autopilot, schools held assemblies to help students. Cope and counseling services were offered free of charge. But nothing seemed to ease the collective ache that had settled over Willow Creek. Even the rain, which had persisted for days, felt like a metaphor for the town's sorrow, a constant drizzle that refused to let up. For the mother, the media. Scrutiny added another layer of torment. Journalists hounded her for statements, snapping photos whenever she stepped outside. Some painted her as a neglectful parent, pointing to her absence in recent years as evidence of her failure. Others sympathized, acknowledging the impossible burden she carried. Either way, she withdrew further into herself, avoiding public spaces, and spending most of her time alone in the house she once shared with her family. One evening, a close friend stopped by unannounced, bringing a pot of soup and a willingness to listen. The mother finally broke down, confessing the depth of her guilt. I wasn't there, she sobbed. Not when they needed me, not when he needed me. Her friend held her hand, offering quiet reassurance. You're here now, she said, gently, and you can honor them by finding a way to heal not just for yourself, but for them. That conversation marked a turning point for the mother. Slowly, she began to take small steps toward healing. She started volunteering at the local shelter, channeling her grief into helping others. It wasn't easy. Some days, the weight of her loss felt unbearable. But she found solace in the kindness of strangers, in the simple act of making someone else's burden a little lighter. Meanwhile, the townspeople continued to grapple with the aftermath of the tragedy. The horrifying detail of the boys' final moments lingered in their minds, a reminder of how fragile life truly is. Conversation shifted from anger and blame to reflection and gratitude. Parents resolved to spend more time with their children. Friends reached out to mend broken relationships, and neighbors renewed their commitment to looking out for one another. Still, the shadow of that terrible day remained. No matter how hard they tried, the people of Willow Creek couldn't shake the image of the boy's terrified face or the knowledge of his lonely final moments. It served as both a haunting memory and a powerful lesson, a reminder to cherish. Every second they had with the people they loved. As weeks turned into months, the town began to heal, however imperfectly. Life went on, as it always does, but the scars of that tragedy would never fully fade. For Willow Creek, the story of the family was more than just a tale of loss. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of love, even in the face of unimaginable pain. And though the horrifying detail of the boy's death would forever be etched in their memories, it also reminded them to hold on to hope, no matter how dark the days might seem. Months passed since the tragedy, and Willow Creek slowly began to find its rhythm again. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a quiet ache that lingered in the hearts of everyone who had known the family. Life moved forward, as it always does, but the scars remained etched not only into the town's collective memory, but also into the landscape itself. The crash site was still marked by skid marks on the road and patches of grass that refused to grow back. Neighbors avoided driving past it if they could, choosing alternate routes to spare themselves the reminder of what had happened there. The mother, once consumed by guilt and grief, found ways to keep moving. Volunteering at the local shelter became her anchor. She spent hours organizing donations, serving meals, and talking to people who came in seeking help. At first, she did it because she didn't know what else to do with herself. But over time, she realized how much good she could bring into the world, even after losing so much. Helping others gave her a sense of purpose, a way to channel her pain into something meaningful. One day, while sorting through boxes of clothes at the shelter, she met a young boy about the same age as her son would have been. He reminded her of him not just in looks but in mannerisms. He had the same curiosity, the same eagerness to ask questions and understand the world around him. For a moment, she felt her breath catch in her throat. Then, instead of pulling away, she knelt down beside him and asked if he needed help finding anything. As they talked, she noticed a flicker of light returning to her own eyes. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was hope. Back in town, the community continued to honor the family in small but significant ways. A memorial garden was built near the crash site, featuring 3 trees planted side by side, one for each member of the family. Engraved plaques beneath the trees bore messages celebrating their lives rather than focusing on their deaths. One plaque read, "For the father who taught us strength." Another said, "For the boy whose laughter filled our days." And the third, "For the girl whose kindness changed hearts." People visited the garden often, leaving flowers or lighting candles in remembrance. On weekends, families brought their children to play nearby, ensuring that the space remained alive with laughter and joy. It was a fitting tribute, a place where sadness coexisted with celebration, where memories of loss mingled with acts of love. As seasons changed, so did the town. Winter melted into spring, bringing new growth and fresh starts. The trees in the memorial garden blossomed, their branches reaching skyward as if trying to reconnect with those they honored. People began to talk less about the horrifying detail from the funeral and more about the lessons the tragedy had taught them. Conversation shifted from fear and blame to gratitude and resilience. Parents hugged their kids tighter, friends called one another more often, and neighbors looked out for each other in ways they hadn't before. Still, the shadow of that terrible day never fully disappeared. It lingered in quiet moments, the pause before bedtime prayers, the glance at an empty seat during family dinners, the sudden silence when someone mentioned the twins' favorite hiking trail. But these moments weren't just reminders of loss. They were also opportunities to reflect on what mattered most. In a strange way, the tragedy had brought the town closer together, binding them with shared sorrow and shared determination to live fully despite it. For the mother, healing was a slow, uneven process. Some nights she woke up drenched in sweat, haunted by dreams of her son calling out to her. Other nights she slept peacefully, comforted by memories of happier times. She kept a photo of the twins tucked inside her wallet, pulling it out whenever. She needed reassurance that their bond hadn't been erased by death. The image showed them standing arm in arm, smiling brightly against the backdrop of a summer sunset. Looking at it reminded her of the promise she'd made to herself, to carry their light into the world, even if she couldn't hold them close. Anymore. One crisp autumn morning, the town gathered for a special event, the unveiling of a mural dedicated to the family. Painted on the side of the old library building, it depicted scenes from their lives, the father teaching his kids how to ride bikes, the twins laughing as they splashed water at the lake, and all three sitting together under a tree, reading books. The artist, a local teenager inspired by the family story, had worked tirelessly to capture their essence. When the mural was revealed, applause broke out among the crowd. Tears flowed freely, but they were tears of gratitude this time, gratitude for having known such remarkable people and for being part of a community that refused to let their memory fade. After the ceremony, the mother stood quietly beside the mural, running her fingers along its painted surface. Someone approached her, a woman she vaguely recognized from the church service months earlier. "I'm sorry for your loss," the woman said softly, "but thank you for reminding us how important it is to love fiercely and live fully." Words struck a chord deep within her. Love fiercely. Live fully. Those 4 words encapsulated everything she wanted to carry forward, not just for herself, but for her family. She nodded, managing a small smile. "Thank you," she replied. "That means more than you know." By winter, the town had settled into a new normal. The holidays rolled around, bringing twinkling lights and festive cheer. Houses were decorated, carolers sang on street corners, and hot chocolate warmed chilly evenings. Yet, amidst the celebrations, there was an unspoken understanding that joy could exist alongside grief. Families lit extra candles in memory of loved ones, shared stories of those no longer present, and found comfort in knowing they weren't alone in their sorrow. Willow Creek wasn't the same as it had been before the tragedy. How could it be? Too much had been lost, too many wounds had been opened. But it was stronger in ways that mattered most. Its people had learned to lean on one another, to cherish every moment, and to face life's uncertainties with courage. They carried the weight of their loss not as a burden but as a reminder of what truly mattered: connection, compassion, and the enduring power of love. And though the horrifying detail of the boys' final moments would forever be etched in their minds, it served as both a haunting memory and a powerful lesson. It reminded them that life is fragile, unpredictable, and fleeting, and that within that fragility lies its greatest beauty. For the people of Willow Creek, the story of the family was more than just a tale of tragedy. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a call to live with intention, and a promise to honor those we've lost by living well. In the end, the town emerged changed but not broken. Scars remained, yes, but so did hope. And in the quiet moments, when the wind rustled through the leaves of the memorial trees or sunlight danced across the mural's vibrant colors, it almost felt like the family was still there, watching over the town they loved. Their legacy lived on, not in the horror of their deaths, but in the love they'd shared and the lives they'd touched.